The kind of morning that doesn't apologize for itself had settled over Fort Denning like a judgment. Cold, flat light. No wind, the kind of silence that makes everything feel louder than it should. Sergeant Elena Voss stood at the edge of the training field with her boots already caked in red clay, her arms at her sides, her jaw set like she'd been carved from something harder than the ground beneath her. The bruise along her jaw was fresh. The one across her collarbone was older, yellowing at the edges, and the thin scar that ran from her left temple down toward her ear, that one wasn't going anywhere. She didn't explain them. She never did. The squad was assembling behind her. 32 soldiers, all male, most of them young enough to still believe that loudness was the same thing as strength. They'd heard she was coming. Rumors travel faster than orders on a base like this. Some said she was a washout from a classified unit. Others said she'd been transferred because she couldn't handle real deployment. Nobody had the truth. And in the absence of truth, people fill the silence with whatever makes them comfortable. Private Colt Mercer was the kind of comfortable that came from never being challenged. Broad shoulders, easy smirk, the type who'd learned early that being the loudest in the room usually meant being the last one questioned. He stepped forward from the line just enough to be noticed, just enough to have an audience. "So this is our new field instructor," he said, loud and lazy, voice carrying across the field like he wanted an echo. "Heard you got hurt pretty bad out there, Sarge. Must have been rough."
Though, we need
he
to bring
paused,
snacks.
letting the grin settle. "Don't worry. We'll go easy on you." A few recruits laughed. Nervous laughter, the kind that isn't really about finding something funny, but about not being the one standing alone when the music stops. Elena didn't turn around, didn't move, didn't even exhale differently. She just kept her eyes on the horizon, on the flat grey line where the sky met the distant tree line, like she was looking at something none of them could see. Like the words had simply passed through her and left no mark. That silence. That complete, unbothered, terrifying silence. It unsettled Mercer more than he wanted to admit. So he pushed. "Seriously, though," he said, taking one more small step forward, lowering his voice just enough to seem casual. "What exactly are you supposed to teach us? How to get carried out of a hot zone?" The laughter was louder this time, more committed. The way laughter gets when it smells permission. And still, Elena Voss said nothing. She turned slowly, not with anger, not with the hot flush of someone who'd been wounded. She turned the way a door closes in an empty house, quietly, completely, final. Her eyes moved across the squad, not scanning, not searching, settling, one face at a time, patient, like she was memorizing something she'd need later. When her gaze landed on Mercer, he stopped smiling. He didn't know why. He just did. From the far end of the field, partially obscured by the shadow of the equipment shed, Colonel Dana Hartwell stood watching, arms folded, face unreadable, shoulders back. She'd been there since before the squad arrived, watching, waiting to see how this would unfold. She already knew who Elena Voss was. She'd read the file, all of it, the parts that were public and the parts that weren't. She knew what this woman had come back from. She knew what it cost. She didn't step in yet. She wanted the squad to feel the weight of what they'd just done before she told them what it meant. The morning drills were brutal. Elena ran them through movement patterns that left 3 recruits bent over with their hands on their knees before the first hour was done. She didn't raise her voice, didn't offer encouragement or criticism, just demonstrated, pointed, waited, demonstrated again. Her movements were efficient in a way that made everything look effortless, which somehow made it worse, because they could all see how far they were from that. Mercer pushed through it. He was strong, genuinely strong, and he knew it, and for a while that was enough to keep his confidence steady. But by the second hour, something started to shift, because Elena Voss wasn't just running drills. She was reading them. Every weak angle, every hesitation, every moment, a recruit dropped their guard, or leaned too far forward, or telegraphed their movement before it happened. She saw all of it, and she corrected it without a single word of cruelty, which was somehow the most disorienting thing any of them had experienced. By the time Colonel Hartwell walked onto the field, the squad had gone quiet in a different way than before. Not the quiet of disinterest, the quiet of people who are paying attention and aren't sure what they're learning yet. Hartwell stopped a few feet from the center of the formation. She didn't announce herself. She didn't need to. "At ease," she said. The squad settled. She looked at them for a long moment. Then she looked at Elena, who was standing off to the side with her arms loose at her sides, breathing evenly, like she hadn't just spent 2 hours pushing 32 soldiers past their limits. "I want to tell you something," Hartwell said. Her voice wasn't loud. It was the kind of voice that had stopped needing to be loud a long time ago. "About the woman standing in front of you. And I want you to listen like your career depends on it. Because for some of you, it might." No one moved. 3 years ago, she began, a 6-person tactical reconnaissance unit was inserted into a region I'm not going to name. The mission was simple on paper. Observe, document, extract. 48 hours in and out, clean. She paused. It was not clean. The field felt smaller suddenly, like the air had pulled in around them. They were compromised within 18 hours. 2 members of the unit were killed in the initial contact. One was critically wounded. One sustained a head injury severe enough to render him non-responsive. The remaining 2 had to make a decision in a window of about 40 seconds. She stopped walking. One of those 2 was Sergeant Elena Voss. Somewhere near the back of the formation, someone shifted their weight. The sound of boots on gravel was very loud. "The extraction point was 9 miles out," Hartwell continued. "The weather had closed in, air support was grounded, the enemy was actively searching the grid, and Sergeant Voss had just taken a round through her left shoulder." She let that land. Through, not grazed. Through. Mercer's smirk was completely gone now. It had been gone for a while. He just hadn't moved his face yet. She made a tourniquet from the strap of a destroyed communications pack. She stabilized the unconscious soldier with what she had in her kit and what she improvised from the terrain. She loaded him, and she walked. Hartwell's voice didn't waver. For 11 hours, in near-zero visibility, with a compromised shoulder, 2 cracked ribs from a fall she sustained in hour 4, and a left boot that had filled with blood by hour 6. No laughter now, no sideways glances. Just 32 people standing very still and a woman who had still not said a single word. She did not stop, Hartwell said. She did not call for help that wasn't coming. She did not leave him. When she reached the extraction threshold and made radio contact, the first thing she said was not her own status. It was his. She looked directly at Mercer now, not with anger, just with a kind of clear, measured certainty. His vitals, his injuries, what he needed, herself second, always. The silence that followed was not uncomfortable. It was the silence of something settling, of weight being redistributed. "The soldier she carried out that night," Hartwell said, "is currently serving as a training officer at Fort Benning. He has a daughter. She's 2 years old." She paused. He named her Eleanor. Nobody moved for a long moment after that. The words had gone somewhere deeper than ears. Colonel Hartwell turned slightly, almost toward Eleanor, but not quite. Her voice came down to something quieter, something that wasn't for the whole squad anymore, even though the whole squad heard it. She could have taken a full medical discharge, full honors, no questions asked, no one would have said a word against it. A breath. She came back voluntarily. She asked for this assignment. Field instruction for pre-deployment cadets, the hardest rotation we offer. The colonel's eyes moved slowly across the formation. "She asked for you." It was that last part that hit differently. Not the heroism, not the injury, not the 11 hours in the dark. It was the choice. The deliberate, unnecessary, costly choice to come back and stand in front of people who hadn't earned her time yet. To teach them. To give them something she'd learned through loss and cold and blood, so that maybe they'd come home when she hadn't been sure she would. Mercer stood very straight now. His hands were flat against his thighs. He wasn't the same person he'd been 40 minutes ago, not because he'd been lectured, not because he'd been punished, but because something had been placed in front of him that he couldn't unsee. The weight of what he'd said that morning sat in his chest like a stone that didn't have anywhere to go. Hartwell stepped back. "Carry on, Sergeant." And Elena Voss, for the first time since the morning began, looked directly at Mercer, not with anger, not with satisfaction, just with a kind of steady, clear-eyed acknowledgement, like she saw him exactly as he was, not what he'd been an hour ago, but what he was right now, standing in the rubble of the version of himself he'd walked in with. She gave a single nod, then turned back to the field. "From the top," she said. Quiet, calm, like the morning had simply reset, and they ran the drill again. That evening the mess hall was the usual controlled chaos of aluminum trays and overlapping conversations and the specific energy of people who are physically exhausted but not ready to be still yet. Mercer got his food and stood for a moment in the middle of the room, scanning. He saw her in the far corner, same table as the night before, he assumed, alone, back straight, eating slowly. He walked over, no speech prepared, no apology speech drafted in his head on the way across the room. He just walked over and set his tray down across from her, and sat. She looked up, looked at him, said nothing. He opened his mouth, then closed it, then said the only honest thing he had available to him at that moment. "I didn't know." She held his gaze for a moment. Then, quietly, "You should learn how to not need to know first." He didn't respond. She wasn't wrong. He picked up his fork and ate. 2 minutes later, another recruit sat down, then another. No announcement, no ceremony, just trays and chairs and the quiet collective admission that something had changed. At the end of the table, one of the younger recruits, barely 19, a kid named Ortega who'd barely said 20 words since arriving at Denning, leaned forward slightly. "Sergeant Voss," he said, "can I ask you something?" She looked up. "Why'd you really come back?" He wasn't being disrespectful. He genuinely wanted to know. You could hear it. After everything, why come back to this? She was quiet for a moment, long enough that some people might have thought she wasn't going to answer. Then she set down her fork and looked at the table for just a second, like she was picking the right words from somewhere. They didn't come easy. "Because the ones I lost didn't get to," she said, "and the best thing I can do with the time I've got is make sure fewer people get lost in the first place." The table stayed quiet for a long time after that. Not the quiet of discomfort or absence, the quiet of something being understood, really understood. The kind that doesn't need a response because the words have already done what words are supposed to do. Later that night, long after the mess hall had emptied and the base had settled into its nighttime rhythm, Colonel Hartwell stood in the doorway of her office, watching the lights of the training field in the distance. Her adjutant knocked lightly on the frame. "She didn't say a word all morning," he said. "Not until the drill, even after Mercer." He shook his head slightly. "How does someone do that?" Hartwell was quiet for a moment. "Because she's already been through the worst thing," she said finally. "Once you've carried someone 9 miles in the dark with a bullet in your shoulder, a private with a loud mouth doesn't really register as a threat." He nodded slowly. "You think she'll stay, past the rotation?" Hartwell looked out at the lights. "She'll stay as long as she's needed," she said. "That's who she is." And somewhere across the base, in a small bunk at the end of a quiet corridor, Sergeant Elena Voss lay on top of her covers, still in her uniform, staring at the ceiling. The shoulder ached the way it always did at night. The scar along her temple pulled faintly when she was tired. She didn't fight the pain. She'd stopped doing that a long time ago. On the small shelf above her bunk, next to her field manual and a worn photograph she kept face down, there was a single folded piece of paper. A letter she'd received 8 months ago from a hospital in Germany, from a soldier who'd woken up in a field bed and been told what had happened. Who'd spent 3 weeks writing and rewriting before he finally sent it. She'd read it once, just once, folded it and put it there and never opened it again. She didn't need to. She remembered every word. You didn't leave me. I don't know how you kept going. I don't know how you had anything left, but you did. And I get to go home because of it. I get to be somebody's father because of it. I don't know how to say thank you for that. I don't think there are words. So I'm just going to spend the rest of my life trying to be someone worth carrying. She closed her eyes. Outside, the base was quiet. Tomorrow, there would be another formation, another set of faces that didn't know what they didn't know yet. Another morning of red clay and flat light, and the long, slow work of making someone ready for things you hope they'll never face. She'd be there. She always was. If this story hit different, if you felt something in it, share it with someone who needs to be reminded what real strength looks like. This is Code of Valor. We don't just tell war stories, we tell true ones. Subscribe and never miss one.